Hi everyone, and welcome to the webinar. This is Anna Sawyer. I am here from Trada, and I will be joined today by Matt Heinz, who I will introduce in just a moment. So today we're going to be talking about content marketing that actually helps sales. Really looking forward to some of the awesome advice that Matt will have for us today. Before we start, I just want to talk about a couple things. First of all, this conference is absolutely being recorded. You will get an email later today with a link to the recording and the slides. And so, if you have any audio problems or have to skip out, don't worry. You will definitely be able to get all of this excellent information later. Secondly, if you have any questions, and we love your questions, please type them directly into your chat box, and we will get to as many as we possibly can at the end. Finally, we would love if you would tweet about the webinar today. Please use the hashtag #SalesMarketingContent. We will choose one of you at random and give you a $25 gift card to Amazon.com. So definitely worth tweeting out some of the excellent nuggets of information that Matt will be presenting today. So I'm very, very happy to introduce Matt Heinz of Heinz Marketing. Matt is a friend of Trada in many ways. He's done some guest blog posts before, I believe. And he really just has a wealth of information about all things marketing. I feel like he's really done it all. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Matt.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Is there anything you want to say about kind of your experience in the marketing world before we kick off?
I think I've worn a lot of hats. I think one of the advantages for me, especially with this content, is that I've been on both the sales and the marketing side. And the approach we typically take is that our clients and the people we work with don't really care about sales versus marketing. They care about closed business. So it forces us to think about the customer versus thinking about sales and marketing separately. And I think that's kind of reflected in a lot of the content we'll walk through here today.
Great. Well, we are so happy to have you. Matt, I'm actually going to have you just take it away and drive these slides and share your content with everyone today.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, everyone, for joining, and very excited to be here. Thank you, Trada. Thank you, Anna, for giving me the opportunity. And I think we should have some really good content to share here. Wanted to quickly walk through what I'd like to present, and then we'll get right into it. And I think we're going to have a lot of time for questions at the end. So hopefully the content that I'm going to present here is very relevant to each of you that are on the call, relevant to the work that you're doing. I'm assuming that most of you are in a marketing capacity in an environment where you need to help the sales organization. So hopefully the content itself is valuable, but I would love to take questions afterward. And if we don't get to every question, feel free to email me, send me a tweet, and I'm happy to answer any of the questions directly. As Anna mentioned, they're recording this. We've got a copy of this deck that if hopefully Trada can make available, but I'm happy to make it available as well. And as a thank you also for everyone on the call today, we offer a number of things. We offer a 10-minute brainstorm, which is basically our chance to engage with anyone on any questions they may have about this or any other specific marketing questions. Written a couple books on selling, including one called Successful Selling. Happy to give anyone a digital copy of that. And also related to this topic, we've got a new white paper on successful content selling best practices. So if anyone wants 1, 2, 3 of those, happy to share any of that as well. Okay, let's get rolling. What I want to cover today are a few things. Get the slide up here. Okay, first is specifically how content fits into the sales funnel. Most of the time when I present anything related to sales or marketing or components of it, I like to start with what the sales funnel looks like and put it in context. Because if we're just writing content for content's sake, if we're just sitting in our marketing corner and writing content, we don't necessarily know that that's having an impact for the sales organization. And more importantly, you have to understand the way that you're engaging a prospect from start to finish to understand whether or not that content is actually the right content in the right context at the right place to help move sales through the funnel. I think you also need to tie that to the way the customer wants to buy. I'm going to spend a lot of time today talking not necessarily about how to create content, but what content to create and how to really dig in and understand your customer well enough so that you can completely create all of your content based on how they're leading up to and into an active buying process. I'll talk about then some specific best practices, common mistakes I think a lot of people make, talk about some tactics around content strategy, planning, and execution to help give you a framework for how to do some of this, and then give a little bit of contextual best practices. So hopefully that's helpful as we go through here moving forward. And Anna, if you're still on, I think we've seen there's a couple questions here on the hashtag. Can you give the hashtag one more time?
Yep, the hashtag is sales marketing content. And Sarah, if you could go ahead and send that out to everyone. Sarah is Trada's marketing intern, and she will be quietly helping you answer your questions through the chat.
Beautiful. Thank you, both of you, very much. All right, so let's first look at the sales funnel. This is a lot of words, but I'm going to quickly explain what I think I mean here. A lot of organizations, when they think about a sales funnel, they think about the bottom half. They go right to an active sales cycle and hope people become a new customer. Well, 30 years ago, IBM made this a successful sales strategy. It doesn't really work as well today, and I think most of you on the call probably know that. It's not okay to start calling a bunch of prospects and saying, hey, are you ready to buy? Are you ready to buy? Are you ready to buy? Because people don't work that way. I like to say it's really not appropriate anymore to ask your prospects to sleep with you on the first date. They're just not ready to go. So most prospects, even if they're qualified, are not ready to buy. I think there was a stat somewhere from Marketing Sherpa about a year ago that indicated in B2B, for inbound leads, so for people that actually call in or sort of respond to something, only about 10 to 15% of those leads are qualified and ready to buy. 60 to 65% of those leads are qualified and not yet ready to buy, meaning they're the right person in the right organization, but they're not in an active buying cycle. And that's where you have to go back up a level to where we talk about the drip marketing. And I guess I don't think I'm giving any new context, new information to people here, but I think this is the context, this is the middle of the funnel context for the drip marketing. These are people that are qualified, that you think you have something to sell to right now. They're not ready to hear that message. They're not ready to engage. Or they may be ready, but the organization is ready. Or they're super excited, but they're not in a budget cycle and they don't have money now. You need a format to be able to engage those prospects on a regular basis. Your sales team should not be doing that work. Your sales team should not be managing and working with the prospects that are qualified but not ready to buy. They need to be spending their time at the bottom half of this inverted triangle, right? So if you're spending your time on drip marketing, engaging those prospects, over time, you will generate a lot more opportunities for the sales team to work with. We work with a worked with a customer a couple years ago that started with us with a database of 55,000 prospects of dubious origin, right? I mean, some of these they thought had come from a trade show. Some of them they had no idea where they'd come from. The sales team assumed that they were all dead, that they were just all dead prospects. So we said, okay, fine. We'll do something separate for your sales team in terms of getting them fresh leads. The marketing team is going to take over this database. Well, 6 months later, 45% of their new sales came from that list. And there wasn't any magic there necessarily. I mean, we did some work to come up with the right kind of content, but a lot of it was being in the right place at the right time more often. And it did involve mapping the content we created and put in front of people, not just to our product, not just to here's more features, here's what we do, did you know we can do this, here's a press release. It was content specific to the frame of reference the customer's coming into, the context in which you're selling into, the problems they have on a more regular basis. And we'll get into that in a minute. But you take that a step further up, and you get into sort of where I guess I would say social media is part of this equation, right? I mean, I'm a hammer sometimes from a sales standpoint, and everything looks like a nail. So when I think about things like social media and even PR to a certain extent, I think about that at the very top of the pipeline. I think about that in the context of I've got prospects out there that are starting to discover me, and I don't necessarily know who they are, but I want them to know who I am. I want them to know what I'm doing. I want them to know how smart I am, not just about what I'm selling, but what I'm enabling, the problem I'm engaging in, the context in which I'm selling. So the more of that content you can create at the top of the funnel, and the more you can manage the top of this funnel, the more that's going to drip down prospects into your sales team, right? Your sales team should love looking at this. They should know that you're managing a huge pipeline at the top. And of course, if I had to redo this pipeline today, it probably wouldn't look so linear, because this makes it look like, well, I got 1,000 people on one stage, it goes down to 100, it goes down to 10, goes down to 1. It's nonlinear. The top of this pipeline needs to be significantly larger than what this demonstrates. And all that has to do with content. And the content has to do with who is your customer, what do they care about, and what are they interested in. We'll get into that here very shortly. Translate that into then basically some very clear metrics. And I'm using this as just an example to demonstrate quantifiably how I think you should think about how many people you need to engage in this process. Now we'll get into the content. If you know how many sales you need to do, if your sales team says I need a certain number of sales, and you can work with them on understanding what the conversion rate is from lead to opportunity, opportunity to sales, then you should be able to put that into a mathematical model. Now what you see here, and again, this is actually a template that I'm happy to share with anyone as well. If you get the deck, you'll have it. If you want the spreadsheet, add that to the list of stuff you email me about, and I'll send you a copy. But you can basically take your marketing plan and make it a mathematical model and say, listen, if I need to get X number of sales, how many opportunities do I need? To get to that, how many leads do I need? And then to take that a step further than what this spreadsheet has, which is the next tab of this spreadsheet, is, okay, to get to that many leads, what are the channels I'm using? What are the direct marketing channels I'm using? What are the social channels I'm using? What are the content channels I'm using? Now, your conversion rate off of blog content, off of tweets, after Facebook updates may be extremely low, but your frequency opportunity in a lot of those channels is significantly higher as well. You should absolutely be able to model that. You may have no idea what those numbers look like today, but as you start to measure clicks, as you start to measure, through a number of different tools that are available online, many for free, what engagement and conversion rates look like from one side to another, from the top of that funnel through to the middle, through to the bottom, you can eventually understand and quantify what this means. Now, why do I bring this up? I do it for a couple reasons. One, this should give you a sense for what kind of volume and what kind of scale your content marketing needs to include to really to really drive your sales funnel. But also, this is the kind of number that is going to take your content marketing and make it real for your CFO, make it real for your sales team. Get rid of the organization that doesn't necessarily understand PR and doesn't understand what they call the fluffier side of marketing. And if you just do content for content's sake, it's going to feel like that and look like that. But if you can put it into this kind of a format, if you can put it into the format of the funnel we talked about beforehand, and if you can put it into the format of having a spreadsheet that says, listen, all of this is not just done when we hope we're getting traffic. This is done because we are going to generate readership that turns into conversion, that turns into leads, that turns into drip, that turns into opportunities, that turns into sales, because that's why we're here. All right, I'm going quickly because we've got a lot here, but hopefully everyone's got it, and we'll take questions at the end, obviously, as well. So now I want to talk a little bit about your customers, right? Hopefully you have a good sense for who you're selling to, and you probably saw at the top of that funnel, you start with a really crisp sense of who your profile is. Who are they? What do they need? What are they looking for? Well, let me take that a step further. A lot of us, when we think about our target prospect, we think about them at the moment when they're ready to buy. We think about what they're looking for. We think about what the problem they're trying to solve. But we don't always think about the motivations that lead into that. We don't think about the symptoms that lead to that purchase event. And one of the greatest opportunities that the web gives us as marketers and as salespeople, and I think especially the social web gives us, is that we can now see people far earlier in the buying process than ever before. We know that the buying process has always been significantly longer and larger than the selling process, right? I mean, used to be we'd have a product, we'd have advertising, whatever, people would call us and say, I'm ready to buy. And a buying signal used to be, how much does that cost? What are the terms? People start talking about what it would be like to actually have this product. Well, now a buying signal is far more than that. A buying signal is a symptom. A buying signal gives you the opportunity to know someone is actually experiencing problem or pain or envisioning or fantasizing about the outcome that they're trying to achieve without necessarily knowing what a solution is. And I'll get into that point in a minute, but I want to give an example of what this means in terms of thinking about your customer. We've done some work with some companies that are doing marketing to real estate agents. And what they're doing is they're actually trying to help real estate agents better market themselves and their services to prospective home buyers and sellers. Now, the best way to do that is not to position yourself as a real estate agent. Hey, I'm a real estate agent. You should come work with me. That's a commodity, right? I mean, and I don't mean to say that real estate agents are a commodity, but if you're waiting to the point when someone looks for a real estate agent, they're doing research. They're starting to search for a lot of different things that may actually commoditize yourself. So if you want to position yourself early on and build credibility and trust and preference with prospective buyers and sellers, you need to be with them before they're thinking about buying or selling. But what does that look like? So we did research, and we went all the way back and sort of spent some time with people that had just bought or sold a home. And we asked them questions. Why did you do that? When did you start thinking about that? What made you think about that? What made you do that? So we essentially, long story short, constructed a timeline that showed us how people were thinking about buying and selling a home and when that started. That timeline, what we found, was far longer than we ever thought it would be. We found that the typical home seller spent about 18 months from the time they started thinking about selling until the time they actually sold. The first-time home buyer, someone that bought a home for the first time, it was 28 months. It was over 2 years. Now, that doesn't mean that 28 months ago they started looking at listings. 28 months ago they started collecting experiences, should we say. My rent is too high. I'm tired of living in an apartment. My commute sucks. I want a lawn. I've got kids and I want them to be somewhere else, right? So I think those kind of things those are the experiences that people build up, and then eventually they move from a passive to an active stage. So I challenge those of you that are on the call today, how well do you understand not only your customer and the profile of your customer, but how well do you understand the path that they take that leads to them wanting to transact? Because it's not important enough to just market to them right at the point when they're ready to transact. You have to get to them in advance, and that's one of the biggest opportunities for content marketing for anybody selling, whether you're selling to consumers or whether you're selling to a B2B audience. So for instance, if I'm a real estate agent, I want to help people understand the neighborhoods they could move into. I want to help people understand the terms that they're related to buying and selling a home. I want to help people with the list of top 10 considerations when you're thinking about a new neighborhood. Maybe it's related to if you've got a family or you're moving into something bigger, you're downsizing, right? So those are the different things that if you understand the customer in the lead up, you've got an opportunity to engage them early. Now, those people are not going to be ready to buy, by definition, right? These are not the lead you give to your sales team, right? Because your sales team should be spending time on people that are qualified and ready to buy. It's your job as a marketer to collect as many leads as possible, to build a relationship with the right profile of people that are at various stages of not ready to buy. Now, let me go back and give an example then in that real estate context. So you got 28 months or you got 18 months. So I think, sorry to stop here. I think we're having a little bit of audio issues. I'm gonna click the mute button and see if we can resolve this real quick. Hold on one second.
Oh, I think this may have actually been for a different Matt.
Oh, sorry. All right. Sorry.
Yeah, guys, if you are having audio issues, it is probably based on your internet connection. So please do go ahead and follow the instructions of Amanda from ReadyTalk, and she will help you out. Sorry, Matt. This was perhaps a chat message trying to help someone who is having some audio issues. So please sally forth.
Yep. All right. I will sally forth. Quick aside and true story. Well, true story based on what my mom told. My mom told me that when she named me Matthew, she didn't know any other Matthews. It's hard for me to believe that now that there are a billion Matthews. But all right. So 28 months from people start thinking about buying a home until those first-time buyers actually transact. We ask people when they choose a real estate agent. And people said, yeah, we definitely want to work with a real estate agent. And by the way, the for sale by owner volume is going down now. People think this transaction's too long, the stack of paperwork's too high. Yeah, I need someone to help me with this. So people want to work with an agent. We said, okay, you're going to work with an agent. We asked when they chose that person, and that was pretty late in the process. How long did you take to actually find and choose a real estate agent? Well, most people would spend 3 to 4 days at most to find a real estate agent. That's 28 months in the process, 3 to 4 days. So if you're trying to market to someone that is in the market, that's qualified, ready to buy, and is actively seeking solutions. Now that, if you're selling a B2B solution, that period may be a little longer, given. But your opportunity, your window, if you're trying to reach someone that's qualified and ready to buy, is going to be extremely small, especially related to the opportunity to engage people when they're thinking about it, when they're just building up experiences, when the symptoms are being created and are being experienced. And that's where your content should really drive. All right, I think I beat that to death. All right, let's move on. I do want to talk a little bit, though, about the type of content you create in that and the difference between their problems versus your opportunities, right? Your prospects aren't talking about you. Your prospects don't really care about you. They may not know you exist, and they may not actually think about and value you. I usually use myself as an example. I've got a sales and marketing consulting company. Very few people actually want to hire a sales and marketing consultant. What they really want are more sales, right? I mean, very few people actually really want to buy a drill. What they really want are holes. But to get a hole, you often have to buy a drill. So if you think about that in terms of the progression of the way people buy and the way that we typically need to approach people from a content standpoint, a lot of times we spend our time in the middle. We spend our time talking about the solution. We may create content that puts benefits around our solution, but if it's still about the solution, we're talking about something that people don't value. People spend time first thinking about the pain of the problem. This is where the experiences come from. And they eventually get to the outcome and objective, right? They eventually start thinking about what they're trying to achieve. The solution is the bridge they may or may not understand. They may or may not know it exists. You need to speak to the outsides of this. One of the ways to demonstrate sort of empirically, that this works is by looking at search. If you go to search and you look at, go to Google and look at the keyword volume that exists for these 3 categories. You go to solutions first, right? You're going to see a ton of volume. You're going to see a lot of volume from late-stage buyers, but you're also going to see those are some of the most competitive, expensive keywords to buy because everyone wants to compete on the solution side, which means there's people that are ready to buy there, But it also means that those people that are ready to buy have already made up their mind what they're looking for. They've already made up their mind what they're thinking about. And so when they look at the different people they're clicking on, they're now commodity shoppers, right? If you're trying to educate people on the difference between you and other people, if you're trying to educate them on why you're the most influential, the most authoritative seller, or the most provider for them, that's almost too complicated for them at that point. At that point, they're like, I think I know what I need, just show me the lowest price. It's very difficult to compete in that model, and it's one of the most competitive, expensive places to be on Google. Now, take some of those pain and problem and objective and outcome keywords that you know, or that you're soon going to know because you're going to understand the customer and where they come from. Those keywords, if you look in Google, typically have a higher volume because that's the way people think. It's the way people talk. It's what they're starting with. Those keywords will often have a higher volume. They may not be the same exact keywords. If you add up the long tail, that's where you get your volume. But they're lower competition, and there's less volume, and it's a lower cost to get to those keywords. Now, you're not going to get qualified, ready to buy people out of all those keywords, right? But this is the opportunity from a content standpoint to engage people early. Because those keywords aren't as competitive from a natural search standpoint, you create content on your blog and in other channels, the opportunity for you to be in the top 10, to be on the first page of Google for pain, problem, objective, outcome keywords is significant. So let's take that one step deeper. If you understand your buyer, and for those of you that are in B2B, and I think most of you are, you've got the organization you're selling to. And we know that the organization may write the checks, but the individuals are those that decide who's going to get the check, right? So if you're selling to a particular organization in a particular vertical market, you may have a really crisp sense for what that category needs, for what that company needs, for the outcomes that they're trying to achieve. But it's still important to get down to an individual level. How well do you understand the individuals you're speaking to in their unique viewpoint? In this is another template, and this is obviously very simple. You can create this for yourself in 10 minutes. But again, if you want a copy of this, I'm happy to send it to you in Excel. It literally just takes a couple different verticals and types of organizations and says, all right, what does the CIO care about? What does the CMO care about? What does the CEO care about? They're going to have different ways of thinking about a problem. They're going to have different things that they care about uniquely in their position. So there's the general, if you're talking to an individual, no matter what their role is, they care about achieving their objectives. They care about getting a promotion, getting a raise. They care about their ego. But then uniquely, what are they looking at? And this grid shows mostly C-level executives. Well, what if you're selling to a mid-level manager? What if you're selling to a line-level employee? They're going to be approaching a problem in a very different context. They're going to be thinking about it in a different way. And I can't answer that question for each of you now, right? And I'm happy to, if you want to spend your 10-minute brainstorm doing that, we certainly can. But I'd encourage you to think through what are their drivers. What are the things independent of you, independent of your situation, independent of the context you bring to them? What are the things they care about? What are the pain points they have? What keeps them up at night? What wakes them up in the morning? And how do you then start to translate that into your product? And it probably has nothing to do with describing your solutions or describing your actual features or describing how it works. If you go to a networking event and someone asks you what you do, the question you shouldn't answer is, what do you do? The question you should answer is, what do you do for your customers? Right? So you turn that question back around and you answer it in a customer-centric fashion. And if you do that then, and you do that based on the drivers and pain points they have, you're speaking to things they care about. I've heard this described metaphorically as well as trains in the station. If you're talking to a prospect today, you're talking to anyone, and those of you that are on the call are probably like looking at your unread email that piles up as we sit on this webinar. There's trains in your station. There's things you have to get done today. There's things you have to get done before the end of the week, things you have to get done this quarter. Those are your focus areas. If you're going to a prospect and you're trying to sell them something that is not on a train in their station, you have no chance of getting that sale today. You need to focus on getting things that actually fit on their priorities, right? And this goes back to that pain, problem, objective, outcome. Your solution has to fit in. And if it doesn't, it's not necessarily a no today. It may be that this just isn't going to be something that actually closes right away, right? This may be a nice to have now, but a need to have later, and that's part of where your nurture and your content comes in. As you create content, we're going to get a lot more tactical here, I think, moving forward, as you create content, any kind of content, web content, blog content, 3 things you want to think about. What do you want people to see, hear, or learn? What's the core of what you're trying to say? What do you want them to think about it? And then what do you want them to do? Right? When I see a lot of content, I see people doing content, I see a lot of people answering the first question, but they don't necessarily do the next two pieces of these. And I think it's extremely important when you're creating content where you want it to be driving some kind of activities, right? So if you think about those early stages of the sales cycle, and you think about hitting people's motivations, we talk about those different stages in the real estate buying and selling cycle. Well, people went from a passive stage to an active stage to an I'm engaged with a real estate agent stage. There were natural catalysts that move people from one stage to another. But there can be content within the passive there can be calls to action within that passive content that moves people more quickly from one stage to another. So as you create content, think about what you want people to do. It's not just the call to action at the end. It's what the content says and what it implies and what you want people to get thinking about, right? And it may be that you follow up with that content with something else. But think about what you want people to do. Think about what happens after they read the content and make sure that's embedded in your content strategy as well. Quickly, some content mistakes, and I think we'll get into some different types of content that we recommend, and obviously we're going to have plenty of time for questions here as well. Not having a plan up front. I'll show you some editorial calendar samples here in a minute, but not knowing not only who your customers are and what you want to speak to, but not knowing what you're going to create. What are the themes of content? What are the specific pieces of content against that research you already looked at? Who's going to write that content? In what format? In what frequency? In what channel? Super important to have a plan like that up front. Doesn't mean you got to follow the plan. I have yet to see anybody, whether our clients or anyone else, create an editorial calendar or a plan up front and then follow it to a T. And I'll give examples of how I think that looks like. But have a plan up front will make it much more likely you actually follow it. Writing for the company instead of the customer. I think I've beat on this for a while. I think if you're writing to about what you do versus what your customer does, it's not really going to work. I see way too many blogs that are basically just rehashes of press releases and feature updates. There's a place for that, right? That's your customer community forum. There's a section of that can be the product updates. But your content strategy needs to speak to your audience, not to you. Too often, we see content that's created, that's published, and then there's a question, or there's a comment, and then there's silence, right? I mean, even if you're publishing in a blog, which inherently a blog post itself is a one-way communication, right? It basically says, all right, I've got something to say. Take a read. But if you've got your comment, well, first of all, a lot of companies don't have their comments enabled, which seems kind of ridiculous. But if you do, and someone writes a comment back, you should engage in that. You should be the most active commenter on your own blog. It doesn't mean responding to everyone saying, hey, thanks for the comment. But if someone says something, you've got a response, or you want to ask them a follow-up question, engage in that. It will not only get that individual engaged, it will show other readers that you are engaging. It will encourage them to add more comments directly as well. A lot of people think mostly about creating their own content, and I believe that one of the biggest opportunities for most organizations is not just creating, but curating content from others. We had a client that knew that they needed to be much more active on Twitter because that's where a lot of their customers were. We started with them, they had about 65 followers, so clearly they were starting from scratch. We had a plan to not only start curating content from a lot of other sources, but also start creating our own content on our blog and putting that in. Well, long story short, as what happens with a lot of organizations, right? I mean, the content creation didn't happen as quick as they wanted to. But the content curation, the feeding of other people's great content related to that customer started much more quickly. In about a 5-month period, we went from 65 followers to 6,000 followers. And they had a lot of room to grow from there. But once they started creating content more actively, 5 months later, the velocity of followers did not change. So hopefully not surprising to a lot of people on the call, but the moral of the story is it's not about your content, it's about great content. And that great content can come from a lot of places. And there's a lot of benefits of aggregating and curating other people's content. A, you show your customers and your followers and your prospective long-term customers that you're going to be a source, you're going to be an aggregator, you're going to be a filter of great content no matter where it comes from. And you also demonstrate to other people that are writing content relative to your customer, you show them that you exist, right? And you show them that you're willing to promote them. As you start creating content, they will promote you back. And if you're talking to some of the same customers, hopefully in a non-competitive way, it's a great way to start, increasing your following and the impact of your content. And then finally, only producing written content. I think, I have a journalist background. I tend to do a lot more writing than I do other formats. So I think my bias is often more on the written content. But I don't get a lot in this presentation into the impact of video content. But video is extremely important. I think we're going to talk about repurposing here in a minute. But a presentation like this, I know it's being recorded. You take a presentation like this, you put it up on SlideShare, and you put a lead filter in front of it. You're generating leads. You turn this, you send it overseas, you get a transcript, you turn it into a blog post or a series of blog posts. There's tons of things you can do outside of the written word that can engage people in a different format. All right, I want to talk about 3 different types of content, and then talk a little bit about sort of how to plan for and execute that. The 3 types of content, I think, very simple: proactive, reactive, participatory. What I mean by proactive is, these are the things you plan for, right? I think for most of you listening, the blog is going to be your anchor, and the way you execute that is a fairly simple editorial calendar process. You can make it more complicated if you want, but think about the different themes that you need to write about. Think about your customer and think about the things that they care about, and put it down the left-hand side of a very simple spreadsheet that just says, okay, here's the themes of things that we're writing about that we care about. And then just plan week by week across the board. Now, you don't want to necessarily fill all of these boxes in, because that's going to get a little onerous, right? It's going to start feeling a little too intimidating. So maybe start with just 1 or 2 boxes a week. You don't have to write about every theme every week, but this becomes part of your proactive planning process. I'll show you a quick example of what this looks like for another client we worked with, and that's a bit of an eye chart. Again, this is another thing that I'm happy to send to people if they want. You'll get the deck and you can zoom in. But I think what we did here is different colors for different quarters. You've got the themes along the left-hand side. At the bottom, you can see we had multimedia content, some customer success stories and case studies that we filtered in here as well. And I can guarantee you, because I was part of this process, we did not do all of this, right? We did not write all of these things. We wrote most of it, though, and having this editorial calendar made it much more likely that we would actually do what we said we would do. Every Monday morning, we would have a 10-minute editorial planning meeting that we would sit in on, and we would have people from the client side sit in on, and we would look at this and say, okay, what did we plan on doing last week? Did we do it? Is it still relevant this week? Should we do it this week? What's on tap for this week? Who's writing it? Who's creating it? Who's videoing it? When are we going to get that? But then the next step would be, all right, well, let's look at the reactive proactive. What are the things that we couldn't have envisioned way back when we created this content, we created this editorial calendar that just happened? How do we take advantage of news that happens on a regular basis and write about that? We had a client that was basically doing selling investments in distressed properties. So essentially they were buying foreclosed properties and selling investments in those to private investors. In the middle of them doing this, Bank of America was having trouble with this process. They decided to shut down foreclosure sales of all their bank-owned properties across the country. Well, this is a big deal in the little industry that my client was in. So that morning we're in a meeting, and he says, hey, this is actually not that big a deal, and I don't know why people are freaking out about it, and here's why. And he spent the next 45 seconds talking about why. I said, all right, I did not record that. I did not write all that down. But if you could do that again, either tell it to us and we will write it down, or if you could write it down into a quick blog post, let's get that up like now. Because everybody in the industry is talking about this news. So we get that blog post up, and it to this day is still one of their most popular blog posts. It still gets traffic. And that day things just blew up and their phones blew up because everyone wanted to know, how can you help me? What are the things you could do if you've got this kind of an idea? So the opportunity for you to be very reactive in real time on things that are happening in and around your market and with your customers, not just with your product, not just at the trade show you're at, but things that directly impact your customer. Not everyone has the resources to react that quickly to things, but when you can, it's much more likely that you're going to be able to create stuff that makes an impact for your customer. All right. Very quickly in terms of participation, there's a lot of great content that exists that is not yours, that you did not create proactively or reactively, that you still want to participate in. You think about things like LinkedIn answers. If there's a question that comes up that's relevant to what you do, by all means go and answer that. It's important to be a part of the communities that your customers and are involved with. And a couple quick best practices here. I'm not going to walk through it individually because I want to make sure we keep going. But as you can tell, I feel very strongly that you don't want to sell. All right? Your opportunity in a lot of these communities is not to go in and pitch what you do. The opportunity for you, quite frankly, is to go prove how smart you are, how well you understand someone's issues, how well you can connect them with things that they care about so that you earn the right for them to come back and say, wow, that's impressive. Who are you and what do you do? Then you can answer the question. Then you can talk about what you do, still in the context not of what do you do, but what do you do for your customers. You will earn the right to tell your story. You will earn the right to sell if you participate well, if you write well, if you communicate well, and you create content that engages people at their level with the things they care about. I want to give a quick comment about repurposing here. I think the idea that you've got content somewhere that starts in a particular format, that can take a lot of different forms as well. I think one of the easiest things to do is to take a format like this, like a webinar or a video or something, and then repurpose that. So anytime you're doing a webinar, it can immediately become a video. The deck can go up on SlideShare. SlideShare has a great feature now called Lead Share for those of you that aren't using it. That basically makes it really easy to put an optional lead form in front of content. So if you go up on SlideShare and you look for Heinz Marketing, you'll see a lot of our content, and you'll see an example of us doing this. We've posted all kinds of webinar decks, best practice guides, a lot of the sort of spreadsheet and template examples here are up there as well. And we get a handful of leads every day from people that see that stuff and want to learn more. And we never say, do you want to learn more about Heinz Marketing? We say, all right, here's a presentation we did on content marketing. Would you like a copy of a content marketing white paper, right? Hey, here's a deck on sales best practices for Customer 2.0. Would you like a digital copy of the book we wrote, Successful Selling? We're happy to give it away. We're the worst booksellers in the world. We give all this stuff away. And speaking of books, the last 2 books I've written, here's a dirty little secret. They're not books. Well, they're books. They're written. They're in paperback format. You can find them on Amazon. But they both started. The last 2 I wrote started as blog posts. What I did is I said, here's a book I want to write. Here's a book of something I want to write in book format. What would the outline of that book look like, right? It started with blog posts. Those blog posts eventually got stitched together and edited and became a book. You can also do the same thing with a white paper. Why start with a full white paper? Why not start with a series of 5 to 10 blog posts that it can get stitched together and become a white paper? Or take a webinar like this and me just, pontificating. Maybe there's some decent stuff in what I'm saying that can get transcribed and turned into a white paper or a blog post or something else. So I'd encourage you to think about the content you're creating and the ways you can leverage that in a lot of different formats. You don't need to recreate the wheel every time. And you also can say the same thing in a number of different ways for different people. So lots of opportunity there. All right, I'm going to get a new slide here. Some ways to create more content. The question I get a lot when we end up talking about, creating content is, I don't have time. How do I create more content? How do I come up with ideas? Well, I will tell you that it is a discipline and a muscle you have to manage. I think, when I started creating more content for myself and for our business, I did not always have a good list of things to write about. I will tell you that, despite the fact that I now write something on our blog, every weekday, Monday through Friday, I have a list at any given time of between 80 and 100 other blog posts that I want to write, right? I'm never going to finish all that stuff. But what I'm doing is, and I'm not sitting down and saying, what am I going to write? I've just trained myself to look for more ideas in and around me. Like as I'm thinking about my customers, as I'm doing a meeting with the customers, I'm reading something totally separate. I've trained myself to think about, how does this relate to the people that I sell to? How does this relate to people that follow me? I write a lot about sales, marketing, and productivity. So those 3 realms are things that I'm constantly thinking about, now somewhat subconsciously, and writing those down, right? So there's a couple ways that I do this. One is that basically I have a 3-step process. First of all, if I have an idea, I literally just write it down. I just say, okay, here's a potential blog post, and it's no more than a title or a topic, and it goes on a list, right? And I keep a specific list of those that I can look at from time to time. Once I find an idea that I'm like, okay, I think I want to do this one sooner than later, I will literally do an outline of that first, right? And oftentimes what I'll do is I'll print out a piece of paper with that topic at the top, take that with me, and just have it with me at any given time. If a meeting starts late, if I've got a little extra time, my favorite is if I'm on a flight and they tell me to shut off my computer and I've got those 20, 25 minutes from the time I shut it down, we take off, we get to 10,000 feet, I'm sitting there with my pieces of paper and I'm writing outlines, right? I'm writing blog post outlines so that when the double ding comes back on and I can flip my laptop back up, I've got a blog post outline already done. Now I just got to write it, right? And that's not always fast and easy for everybody, but once I've got an outline, once I've thought through the components of something, it's a lot easier for me to zip through getting a draft together. I try to write ahead of time, and I also encourage you, think about guest contributors. As we talked about before, you do not have a monopoly on great ideas for your customer. You probably have a whole set of clients, prospects, partners, investors, complementary non-competitive service providers. The list goes on and on of people that also think about your customer issues. And you could create a farm system of great content that other people could write you that, quite frankly, it sits on your blog. It's driving natural search traffic to you. Not only that, but you've got those people that wrote it are also going to promote it to their communities and in their social networks. And someone else is doing writing for you, right? So I definitely think about those guest contributors. I'm not going to go through this entire list because I want to get us to some Q&A here, but some sources of content inspiration. I do have a blog post on this that goes into detail on these, which we can share as well. But encourage you to get creative in the places that you look for. I mean, like I said, I've trained myself, and we train our clients to look for opportunities to create content out of everything they're doing every day. Here's a few things, right? I mean, things you disagree with, things you think are dumb. Those are things that obviously can generate a lot of interest and a lot of traffic because they tend to be a little contrarian. But just think about the different places in your organization, in your life, in your daily stream of work that could give you ideas for the content. And again, relate it back to and put it through that filter of who your customers are, what they care about, what they're interested in. But I think that as you start to execute on this, and it won't necessarily happen right away, but as you start to do this, as you start to think through this, I think you'll find that coming up with ideas for new content that relates to your customer, that helps with your sales pipeline, becomes a lot easier than you think. All right. I've gone through a lot of content. I know I've gone very quickly, but I wanted to make sure I got through a lot of it. Just wanted to remind you, if you'd like any of these offers, if you'd like to get a copy of this deck, if you'd like any of the other stuff that I forgot to mention in this slide, but were examples and templates in the deck earlier, feel free to shoot me an email or contact the folks at Trada, and they can get a hold of me as well. But that's the end of the deck. Really, again, appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. Appreciate Trada for putting this on, and Anna, I'll send it back to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Matt. That was just fantastic information. Everyone, if you are interested in the 10-minute brainstorm from Matt, please go ahead and just let us know in the chat, and we'll make sure to get you connected with him. Alternatively, you can email him at matt@heinzmarketing.com. I believe that's correct?
Yes.
Yeah, great. So, guys, I want to get to the questions in just a moment. But first of all, remember that with Trada, I know this doesn't actually have a lot to do with our presentation today, but we do offer the ability to hand off your paid search and Facebook advertising to a crowd of experts. Have them do it for you. There actually aren't any fees. It costs exactly the same as if you were to do it yourself. So if you are interested in learning more about this, please type "I'd like a demo" right into the chat box. So we're going to get to the questions now. Everyone, please go ahead and type your questions right into the chat box. We have about 15 minutes. We'll get to as many as we possibly can. I'm going to kick it off with a question from William, who wants to know, hey Matt, can you give me an example of a problem, solution, and objective keywords, an example of problem, solution, and objective keywords for a travel company? So can you just sort of expand on that and maybe use travel as an example?
Yeah, good question. So specifically to travel, I would think that I guess it depends a little bit on what you're trying to do. So let's take like travel agent for example. I think and William, if this isn't the right example, you want me to get more specific, just shoot that in and we'll figure that out. But if I'm a travel agent, which by the way they're coming back, I don't know if you've noticed this. So, you can go and book a trip from Seattle to San Francisco on your own. That's fine. But as people do more complex trips, as they decide to do things and say, like, listen, I don't want to sit and plan my own trip, the travel agents are coming back to help with that, right? So, I want, as a travel agent, to try to get at people that are starting to think about those big trips. What are some of the international trips people could take that are more affordable than they think? What are some of the common mistakes people make when they're planning a trip? Like if you're planning a complicated trip, multiple steps, going internationally, I'll guarantee you if you've never done it before, there are things that you don't know that other people consider secondhand. So if you're a travel agent, you should know those things, right? What are some of those common mistakes, common traps, the things people do that they think they're saving money on, but once they get overseas, they find that it actually costs more money? What you're doing as a travel agent from your content perspective is you're enabling people with information, you're educating, you're demonstrating yourself as a thought leader. You also are subtly demonstrating how complicated it can be to do it on your own, and that, wow, I really maybe shouldn't be doing this on my own. I wish I knew someone that actually knew more about this. Hey, I do. It's the author of this blog post and these blogs and this newsletter I've been reading. So I'm not sure if that's exactly sort of the part of the travel industry, William, you're looking for, but I mean that's an example of how I might think about it.
Great. Thanks so much, Matt. So I'd like to move on to a question from Donna, who, by the way, earlier on asked a question about B2C in the chat. So maybe if you could frame this question both in terms of B2B and in terms of B2C. Donna says, is it a good idea to use questions in the content to get the prospects thinking? Can you talk a little bit about how you could use questions in your content and how you could sort of leverage the idea of asking questions?
Yeah, yeah, of course. I think asking questions is good. Leaving them all unanswered may not necessarily be good, right? But I think I would do a couple things. One, if you're giving people questions to ask, give them some context in which to think about that. If you want to finish a blog post with questions, it's a great way to encourage comments. Depending on the type of content you're creating, like if you're saying, hey, here's what are the top 5 questions you should be asking your travel agent? What are the top 10 questions you should be asking your DJ if you're thinking about doing, as you're planning your wedding? I've seen a lot of very successful wedding planners, actually use this as a tactic, where they're saying, listen, I want people to, think of me as someone that can help them organize an event, but I know that some people that will eventually convert have started by doing it themselves, right? If you're a real estate agent and you want to engender trust and credibility with someone, give people a list of questions they should be asking their real estate agent. Because what you'll probably know is that other real estate agents, if they get asked these questions, may not have a good answer. Right? I mean, I'm actually, in a B2B context, we use this a lot with clients. Instead of giving them sort of a big feature-by-feature competitive matrix of what other competitors do, we think very crisply about what the specific differentiators are for our client versus someone else. And we empower the prospect with a set of questions they should be asking any vendor before they make a decision. Let's say you're a marketing automation company. What are the questions you should be asking any marketing automation company before you make a decision? You can give them questions that not only empower them, that the questions themselves are a source of content, but those questions will lead people more in your direction as well.
That's great. Sort of like self-aggrandizing questions.
A little bit.
Maybe not specifically, but I think setting up a list of questions of what you should ask before you go with someone. We did a webinar recently, and it was questions you should be asking your agency. And it was a really, really great source of content for us, and people just had many, many more to add to the list. I actually really like doing a list of questions and then saying, what other questions would you ask? Let's add to this list. I think building content along with user-generated content is a really effective method too, because people want to chime in.
Yeah. Sometimes I think you'll find by asking questions and by encouraging your readers or your prospects to come back with their own questions, not only are you getting them engaged, not only are you getting them engaged with you wrote to begin with, but their questions will give you new ideas for new content, right? That you could either put into the comment section, or you could say, hey, wait, that's interesting. I did a new piece on that over here. Check it out.
Yeah, absolutely. Also at Trada, we sit in on sales calls and use those questions and use those pain points and those issues to create our content, because those are just right from the source. I think you touched upon this a little bit in your presentation, but it is so successful for us in terms of just really understanding what the customer voice is and figuring out exactly what to address.
Yep.
So it's great. So here's a question from Sarah. How do you suggest building your list for drip marketing? So this is a little bit outside of what you had talked about, but just getting this initial list for drip marketing. What are some of the best practices that you have seen?
Well, I think first of all, you may not start with a list, right? I mean, you may start with a set of content that people are attracted to. So if you go back, if we were to go back to the sales funnel, which I didn't, if I were to rebuild that, not only would I make the top infinitely larger, but I'd also probably make it into a bow tie, because as we all know, the first sale is usually not the end; it is the beginning of a different relationship that turns into renewals, referrals, retention, lifetime value, and all that. But at the top of that funnel, there's an assumption that we don't know them, but they know us. I think there's an assumption that we're creating great content, that because it's good and because it aligns with the keywords and the way that your prospects are thinking, that they're searching for it, they're looking for it, they're finding it on Twitter, they're following other people on Twitter who end up retweeting your stuff, and they discover you that way. I find that I think about my business as I grow the followers that we have and grow the people that are getting our newsletter. It's from people that start by reading a blog post. It's people that start by getting something retweeted that I did. It's the people that start from, quite frankly, something like this, right? Where if they don't think I'm completely blowing hot air, if I have some good things, maybe they go to the site and they start they read a blog post, they follow us on Twitter, and maybe eventually I earn the right to get their email address. Eventually I earn the right for them to actually say, hey, I want to get that white paper, and I'm willing to tell you who I am to get it. Right, so I think it's very similar to the, you don't earn the right, you don't get the right, you don't have the right to tell people what you do until you earn the right for them to ask you about it. Right, so I think, there are a lot of ways you can go and you can build lists. Right, I mean, you can do trade shows, you can do events like this. We do a lot of our own webinars, or you offer a white paper that's some great content, and it's enough content together that you can get an email address from it. But it's not just about building a list; it's also about building followers.
So I have a question for you, and this is a sort of, I think, perpetual philosophical question that I am just interested in hearing your ideas on. There is this idea that, of course, we generate content so that we can get email addresses, so we can reach out to them. But where do you sort of draw the line between what is worthy of collecting an email address, what's worthy of collecting a phone number? There is one school of thought that says, put your content out there, don't put it behind a paywall. Because if your content is good enough, those customers will come to you. But at the same time, those of us who have aggressive, goals for like leads and opportunities, we want to find out, we want more information about who is coming to our site, and we want to be able to lead score them, and we want to be able to, assign, a possible lead score or value to people because they've looked at a certain, number of pieces of content. So what are your sort of thoughts on what content deserves, an email address or a phone number? And
yeah, it's a good question. My flippant answer, which I will move off of very quickly, is what you just described. It's great, but that's your problem, not theirs, right? I mean, the prospect says, listen, I know what I want to get. I want information. I will come to you when I'm ready. I'll come to you if you deserve it. I'll come to you if you have questions. But in the meantime, I don't care that you don't know who I am. Now, back, to be more serious, for our business and for all of our clients, it's very important. At a certain point, we know who they are. We know who they are. We know where they're from. We have some ability to score them or determine if they're ready. And we know that, even in that, example of the 55,000 prospects, by being in front of people more often, with an email that ideally is of value, but they didn't ask for that additional email. We put it in front of them. I believe strongly that context is almost is at least as important, if not more important, than permission today. I think if you're doing that well and you're doing it respectfully and you've already got some kind of a relationship, putting something in front of someone that is of value, if they want to unsubscribe, that's fine, but it's going to be of value, right? So I tend to think that the lower the barrier you put in front of people early on in the relationship, the better. If you don't have a relationship with someone right away, and you want just to start a direct back and forth relationship, ask for a name and an email and nothing else, the shortest form is going to get you the best response. But it also you're not heavy dating yet. You go back to my example before of you can't ask your prospects to sleep with you on the first date. I see way too many sales teams cold call a prospect, and the first thing they say is, can I get 30 minutes of your time? For what? What makes you think that, but you can just call me, and I'm a busy guy, and I'm going to give you 30 minutes. I don't even know who you are. You have to offer me something of value first. You have to demonstrate that you actually have some reason to be talking to me and offer some value before I'll actually give you that attention. Now, I know that doesn't necessarily help someone hit their quota this month. But this is a little bit of how customers work today, and you definitely have to have a longer-term thought process and execution process to engage. But if you do it, and I've given a couple examples so far today, if you do it the right way, it definitely works.
Yeah, and I mean, the idea here, of course, is to do it the right way, have this longer-term sales process, and then have a steady flow of leads, because there is a natural progression for these people that you started with a long time ago.
That's right.
In a perfect world. So I'm going to take just a couple more questions because I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Nick wants to know, what are some practical ways to stay engaged with the sales team? So what are some ways that we can continue to communicate with our sales team, make sure that we get what we need from them, make sure that we keep our relationship friendly and all driven towards the same goals?
It's a great question. I think a lot of companies' solution is very simple. It's just more meetings. I mean, I think a lot of things. Oh, we're gonna start working more closely with the sales team, so we're gonna sit down on their meetings. That's great. It's just spending more time, and you don't necessarily resolve anything. A couple of things I would encourage. One is make sure you're both speaking the same language, and what that means is, what's the definition of a good lead? What's the definition of a qualified opportunity? And do you both have the same definitions and the same goals? I would also, as you're doing your marketing planning, think of your marketing plan for 2012 as a proposal to the customer, and the customer is sales. Now, that doesn't mean the sales team is going to write your marketing plan. It doesn't mean that they get veto power over tactics, but it means that they should approve of what you're going to do to support them. And it also forces you, hopefully, to not only have consistent definitions of of how you define leads and opportunities and what you're delivering to the sales team. It also forces you, hopefully, to have the same means of measuring that success over time. Now, I think marketing is always going to generally own the top of the funnel, and sales is going to own the bottom, and that's just fine. But you should have one voice and one process and one strategy against that. The story that you tell as a marketing team needs to be the same as the story the sales team tells, right? And the only way to do that is to have one strategy and one process, not two.
Yeah, that's interesting. Sometimes I think there can be some disagreement over, who controls the voice and how the message can be lost after things are handed over to sales. Do you have any thoughts about ways that you can sort of mitigate that, that problem?
Well, I mean, one of the tactical things would be, if marketing's got a new campaign, a new message, a new offer, I mean, you need to be very upfront with sales and say, listen, here's what we're doing, here's what we're offering. You can't say, hey, we're going to do a webinar, we're going to have 400 people on the webinar, and everyone's going to get you're going to get all the leads. Those leads may not be that good, right? I mean, someone that just goes to a webinar just wanted to go to the webinar, versus what you've done is where you've got a lot of people, that are saying, hey, I want a demo. You've got a percent of people off of here that are like, yeah, this sounds pretty good. I'd like to learn more about Trada. That's a good sales lead, because now you've got someone that wants to learn more. It doesn't mean they're going to buy next month, but it means that they're engaged. And so having very crisp expectations for the sales team of what you're saying, what marketing is saying, what the context of the customer is, and if I give you this lead, here's what they were looking for, and here's some materials to respond, and here's the way to score that. It makes for, you definitely have to have tighter integration at a tactical and a weekly, daily level with your sales team, but it's one of the best ways to ensure continuity of the voice and the message throughout the entire prospect relationship.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. So I'm just going to take one more question, guys. Thank you so much for joining us today. Final question, can you talk about external resources for content generation? I think you touched on these. Can you talk specifically about some that you have used and that you trust and that you like and that we can afford?
Sorry, you cut out the beginning of that. What were the context of that?
Can you talk about some external resources for content generation?
Oh, yeah. So there's a lot of great places you can go. I mean, we go to a couple. Elance I found is a great source of outsourcing content. There's a company, we're in Seattle, there's a company here locally called Media Piston that is great. I have no idea how they actually make this economics work, but if you need a blog post of about 600 words, you get it back in about a week, and it costs about $28. So pretty ridiculous prices. I think that I would also encourage you not only to look at places where you can crowdsource or get others to write the content, but as I said, I mean, look internally, look at your employees, look at your customers, look at your partners, build that long list of people and organizations that you think could help you, and treat it like your own little sales pipeline. I mean, we've got, for some of our clients, we'll build that long list and assume that a certain percent of them are never going to respond. And another percent of them are going to say, yes, I would love to give you something, and you'll never hear from them again. So, I would encourage you to think about places that you could outsource content, but also look at the places where you don't have to spend, where other people have a vested interest in being a part of your channel, in tapping into your channel, but in turn, that content and their time and expertise is helping you as well.
Thank you. Matt, do you mind saying the name of the two websites that you just mentioned again? I have a couple questions about that.
Yeah. The first one is Elance, E-L-A-N-C-E. And the second one is Media Piston, just Media, M-E-D-I-A, Piston, P-I-S-T-O-N.
Great, thank you so much. Everyone, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the questions right now. Again, Matt Heinz from Heinz Marketing, thank you so much for being here. We've really enjoyed having you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Everyone, if you would like to get a hold of Matt directly, he seems very open to the idea. You can email him at matt@heinzmarketing.com. If you have any questions for us, any follow-up questions, and if you need anything from us, please go ahead and drop us an email at sfox@trada.com. Everyone, we will definitely be giving you a copy of the slides and a recording of this presentation. Probably within a couple hours you'll get an email from us. Thank you so much for joining, everyone. This is the end of the webinar.